Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back over some of the topics featured on Talking Heads over the past week. Laws to protect cyclists, population increases, and eligibility to hold political office were all up for discussion. But first, a bold new outlook for government was outlined during the July sitting of Tynwald. But would it find favour with the public? Here's Stu Peters to take up the story.
Should growing the economy be the government's most pressing priority? Chief Minister Alan Bell says after years of cutting back on expenditure, it's now time to speculate to attract new businesses. Yesterday in Tynwald, the government's Agenda for Change document received unanimous backing from the court, with long-term plans to increase economic prosperity and allow companies to flourish. During the debate, proposals were outlined for a £50 million enterprise development fund to encourage business start-ups and relocation and boost jobs in the island. There are also plans for changes in financial regulation and the work permit system. The Chief Minister said the plan will create an environment that nurtures entrepreneurs and innovation and targets investment that drives growth. Alan Bell insists the government remains committed to three core aims: growing the economy, balancing the budget and protecting the vulnerable. Almost every member stood to speak over the course of a 3-hour debate, all giving their backing to the document.
Now we've balanced the revenue budget. It's a major step forward, bearing in mind the starting point on all this. And now we move on to really re-energising the economy, recognising the fresh challenges now which are appearing in the United Kingdom, in Ireland and further afield. We now have to up our game, and it's heartening to see that all members, I think, tonight recognise that. And if the spirit of working together, of cooperating and focused on the same end continues after today, then I think the Isle of Man is on the road to more success in the future. We have no option. The future of the island, government revenues, the provision of public services, the standard of living of our people, the employment of our people, all depends on having a strong and expanding economy. We cannot deflect from that. So I hope we will have made enough progress over the next 12 months to really set in train all the initiatives that I have envisaged. But as I say, I hope it will overrun over the election period and the next government will carry on what the good work I hope will be done over the next 12 months.
Which sectors of the economy should the focus be on, do you think? Is government investment in new business vital, or is it unlikely the Isle of Man can compete with neighbouring jurisdictions? Let's go to the lines and see what David makes of this. Hello, David.
All for this idea of improving the growth, increasing the growth here, getting businesses over.
Yeah. But
the first thing that they need to do is sort out stable transport links if they want to do business with the UK and Ireland.
Right.
I mean, the steam packet user agreement, that's the first step, obviously, keep that going.
Yeah.
But they need to sort out this patchwork of airline links we've got. The air transport situation at the moment is not stable enough.
Okay.
So, I mean, the days of growth that started in 82, I don't think it's any coincidence that we had Manx Airlines then.
Yeah.
We had a locally based airline. So they're committed to the island. Now, all the airlines we've got here, with the exception of Citywing, which is not really of the...
Oh, sure, they're not a Ryanair, are they? Yeah.
Well, they're not even a Flybe,
yeah.
Or a Stobart Air or any of those regional airlines. We need something that's island-based. Without that, you're not going to have anything like the stability that we had under Manx Airlines. The key point I'm making is that until you have the stability, people are going to be reluctant. You know, if they think that an airline which is based across or in Ireland or wherever is going to pull a route because it commercially doesn't make sense to them, which they're quite within their right to do because they are commercial businesses, which is something government seemed to forget around the time that BA bought Manx Airlines for the Heathrow slots. The airlines are commercial businesses. They need to make money. Sure. And it's not easy to make money as an airline, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, yeah.
They always say, if you want to be a millionaire, start an airline, but start as a billionaire.
Yeah.
If you're going to have stability, you listen to people like Terry Lydiard, who ran Manx Airlines successfully all those years. You actually need, I mean, he wanted route licensing at one point, but you need to be an island-based airline to have route licensing. Nobody who's off island is going to be interested because they will have a commitment to serve those routes.
Sure.
And
okay.
they won't commercially be flexible enough. So
All right, David, some good points there. Thank you for calling today. From my experience of these initiatives, says Paul, we'll get a lot of business setting up here to suck up the funding and then moving elsewhere once it stops. I've seen this in the UK. Yeah, me too, Paul. Stu, the work ethic needs to change on the island for the island to succeed. This is according to Percy. We have a dreadful work ethic here. Nobody wants to work. Government workers are worse. They do as little as possible, as slowly as possible, and on big union negotiated wages. Well, bit of a sweeping generalisation, Percy, but OK, well, let's go along with it for a while. I think we can attract more business. We have some very successful light engineering firms who seem to be able to transport their goods off island OK. The government have doubled their apprenticeships for this sector. We have other small, high-value firms like Industrial Diamonds too, says Liz. You're absolutely right, yeah, we've talked to the engineering sector on this programme a number of times. Instead of paying larger institutions to come to the island and using fund managers to police it, who are these fund managers and what will they be paid? How about reducing financial regulation and the high cost of being regulated on the island and supporting small to medium businesses who have a track record of bringing business to the major financial institutions who have been the backbone of growth on the Isle of Man for the last 30 years rather than destroying them with over-regulation? There's no freedom to flourish on the island. I work for government and work shifts, so get an amount of downtime, currently do 3 other little jobs to keep busy. Some people just need a punch in the face for tarring everyone with the same brush. Rant over, star Stu, great show. Stu, the Isle of Man will collapse. Oh dear. When e-gaming decides to move on, which it will, all the banks have rescinded their investment licences because of Bell and his cronies signing disclosure agreements all over the place, yet the main countries don't. This government is out of control, time for a major change in the Isle of Man. Well, I would suggest that the main countries do sign these international disclosure agreements, and it would be wrong. We'd be seen as a pirate state if we didn't. Stu, we spend our time talking about bringing businesses over to the island. Surely we should sort out some of the stupid bureaucratic stupidity there is over here. Recently I've heard of somebody who was doing a good job and one that they enjoyed, but because they couldn't work 30 hours a week, they were unable to claim family income or whatever it's called now. They were 3 hours short. The employer couldn't give them an extra 3 hours, so when they asked at the DHSS at Markwell House, they were told to go back on the dole as they would get more money. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Surely this is one of those rules that the island UK needs to change. We have loads of come-overs working, claiming all and asunder, but a Manx person can't get what they can, even when they have a job. I don't know that that's true, actually. So now no job and more money on the dole. It just doesn't seem right. OK, fair comment.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Undoubtedly the most talked about subject this week on the programme was the proposal of new laws to protect cyclists.
The family of a woman who died in a road accident have launched a new campaign to protect cyclists across the island. 41-year-old Kate Burge was killed in Kirkmichael when cycling home in August last year. Safe Cycling Isle of Man wants to see a minimum safe passing distance enshrined in law to improve the road safety of cyclists. Should the law be changed to offer more protection for cyclists, or would that make little difference to the behaviour of drivers? Let's go to the lines. We've got Neil on. Hello, Neil.
I'm a commuting cyclist. I've also taken part in many cycling events over the years. I started cycling. My late father taught me to cycle when I was 6 or 7, so I love bikes.
Where do you commute? From?
Well, I'm on the main road, Castletown towards Santonaria, always on that main road there.
Oh, okay.
However, something which I always do, I always wear a yellow fluorescent top. And I think that's very, very important. Many cyclists now are following the fashion craze for wearing these dark Team Sky colours or other dark colours. And I think it's really the kiss of death when you go out on a main road in the Isle of Man at any time wearing dark colours. I think it is rather silly of cyclists to do that.
Well, especially since we've got so many roads and things that have got trees overhanging them and creating areas of shade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I went down to Douglas this morning through to ShopRite, and I wore yellow, but many people don't. But I mean, with the greatest of respect to Kate's family, and I can understand their loss, and they're trying to bring something tangible and forward out of a dreadful tragedy. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to police. Also, as over the last 10 years in particular, bikes have got very, very light now, even commuting bike style machines.
Yes.
And the slightest bit of wind from either the left or the right can either take you in towards the hedge or out towards the line of traffic.
Oh, right.
And so therefore I think car drivers do need to be aware that cyclists do need a couple of metres either side of where they're pedalling to allow for wind blow, etc.
Yeah.
But this tendency again for riding 3 and 4 abreast should be outlawed as well. I mean, that's absolutely crazy as well.
Well, you're a cyclist, and I've got a text from somebody that says, stop people cycling two abreast. So if you're a cyclist, I was going to actually defend cyclists and say, well, you're supposed to be allowing a car's width anyway for them, so if you've got two in there rather than one, then what difference does it make?
Two abreast is fine, Stuart, on a calm day when you've got good visibility and you're wearing a good yellow fluorescent top, and you take the relevant safety precautions. But two or sometimes even three abreast is dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah, things like this tend to polarise opinions, don't they? So it's nice that we're hearing from a cyclist who acknowledges that cyclists have got a responsibility as well. Your comments: I wish helmets were made compulsory for children. Too many irresponsible parents allowing children to fly around the streets without them. We have to do it for car seats and belts, etc., says Sue. On the face of it, minimum separation distance seems like a good idea, says Kevin, although there could be difficulties of one person's word against another. I also believe the full weight of the law should be enforced concerning prosecutions for riding two or more abreast, going through red traffic lights, ignoring halt signs and one-way road restrictions, riding on pavements. Yeah, that is irritating, actually. Someone was recently prosecuted for this, a drop in the ocean, though, says Kevin. Also, as someone who was left seriously out of pocket due to damage caused by a crazy cyclist, I believe it's a long overdue that all cyclists should be insured. Good points. Thank you very much, Kevin. I cycle everywhere, whatever the weather, and have been pushed into a ditch several times by car drivers, really, and bunches of race cyclists. It's not only motorists who want to wake up, and that's from somebody called Dowie, I think, like Joey, but with the D. Stu, wearing compulsory high-vis clothing and helmets would help, and maybe LED flashing lights on all the time. Not many even wear high-vis gear, which is strange when you have your back to faster overtaking vehicles most of the time, okay? Stu, I'm not a cyclist and only realised how vulnerable they were when I pulled into the lay-by on the Ballahutchin and felt my landy shake violently as the cars passed. However, my daughter has third-party insurance for her horse, wears high-vis always, and also uses flashing high-vis tail and headlight to be sure. Cyclists should too. Better safe than sorry, says Jane. Yes. First rule of the road is to keep left. I cycle, follow this rule for my own safety. Unfortunately, many don't, and riding two abreast is madness, says Paul. Okay, I can't quite see. Maybe I'm missing something. I can't quite see why people have got a problem with cyclists riding two abreast. Before we get any new laws for cyclists, do you not think the present road traffic law should be enforced against them, weaving in and out of traffic, on and off pavements and ignoring traffic signs and lights, not forgetting riding two and three abreast? There are a number of cyclists who are not only a danger to themselves, but also a danger to other road users and pedestrians. I think now's the time that cyclists were forced to take out insurance like all of the road users, says Mal. Yeah, I agree. How would lorries pass by on normal and cars on country roads? Should cyclists be banned during rush hours? Why has this particular distance been chosen? Why not more or less? I'm guessing that it's been decided that is, a reasonable amount of space to leave. Give the cyclists a break. There have been many occasions where cars have passed me much too closely, and yes, pushing into the gutter is a regular occurrence. It's not down to bike handling skills either. Many car drivers are texting during commuting time. They can see a car but not a cyclist, and this is just accidents waiting to happen. Cyclists riding in twos do this to remain safe and don't take up as much road as a car. Most cyclists do have public liability insurance too. That's from an angry cycling lady. Oh dear, we don't want any angry cycling ladies. As a careful taxi operator, I can tell you that cyclists on numerous occasions ride sometimes two or three abreast, which is illegal and downright dangerous. Seems that they don't care. They need to look at their highway code, says John. Let's go to the lines. We've got an expert on, and it's Rob. Hello, Rob.
I'm not sure about the expert label, but I've got some experience of cycling and driving, I think, over the last 30-odd years.
Do we need legislation?
When something's forced upon people, it's never welcome, and I think your comments have probably reflected that today.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give a bit of balance, because it's quite a hot topic at the moment, and it seems to make a lot of motorists quite angry, which can be retaliated with anger from other road users.
Oh, it does tend to polarise opinions, certainly, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and you've only got to see some of the Facebook comments after yesterday's hearing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dwell on that too much. It's just I'd like to look at the understanding of what a cyclist has to go through and what a motorist has to go through, and both sides need educating.
Sure.
I think the point, if we look from an Isle of Man perspective, I drive 10 to 15,000 miles a year mostly on Manx roads, but I used to be a pro cyclist. I still ride for leisure now, but I don't really commute by bike, but right. I've experienced of what it's like to ride on Manx roads. I think it is a lack of understanding. I mean, we talk about the riders riding two abreast. In 30 years, I've seen two cyclists ride through a red light in 30 years. So is it a massive issue? Yeah, it's very annoying, and I get very cross when I see cyclists not riding on the road as they should do.
Sure.
The two abreast thing, I don't often see. When riders ride three abreast, I actually had a conversation with a motorist who aggressively beeped a group I was riding with that was riding two abreast. Now, there was only three of us, and there was two riding two abreast, and one rider sat in between. I understand that possibly looks like three abreast. Like I say, in 30 years, I've not seen riders ride three abreast. I saw a ridiculous comment the other day that I saw, well, how do I pass riders when there are six across the road? Well,
right.
I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but what I'm saying is the cyclist and the pedestrian is the vulnerable road user. That's why we're looking at car drivers who possibly feel persecuted, that they pay inverted commas road tax, therefore they have some sort of right, but they are the larger vehicle. So if you look at the Dutch case where we have strict liability, the strict liability is not for the motorist, it's just for the larger vehicle. So it could be strict liability against the cyclist when he has an accident with a pedestrian. The onus of responsibility is on the larger vehicle.
Gotcha.
And I think that's what it's all about. It's got to be an understanding.
All right, Rob, I'm sorry I've got to end it there because I'm running out of time.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
A trio of scouts popped into the studio this week ahead of their trip to Japan.
To tell us more, we're joined in the studio by Explorer Scouts Isla Boyles, Mark O'Connor and Matthew Moore, and Scout leader Julian Ashton. And is there any benefit to the fact that it's in Japan this time? It might be in, Philadelphia or wherever next time. Because I presume that a jamboree is just thousands of scouts in tents in a big field somewhere. So does it matter where it is?
I suppose it doesn't. That's why it travels all the way around the world. Lots of different countries have held jamborees over the years. As I say, this is the 23rd jamboree that's been held. And they're held all over the place.
Mark, tell me why you're looking forward to this particularly.
We were selected for the Jamboree about 20 months ago, and when I saw the application I just thought, right, that's definitely something I want to go, because it's Japan, it's a country that's just so different from the Western world in which we live in. So yeah, you're going to Japan, but you're also going to meet tens of thousands of scouts from every single country in the world, near enough, all in one place, and all to share and experience other
So
cultures.
it could be on the moon, effectively. It's the fact, it's the camaraderie, and it's getting to meet people from all sorts of different cultures that's the big draw for you.
Yeah, that's it.
Matthew, what is it that appeals to you about Japan? Are you a big manga fan, or...?
It's the fact that it's in Japan. It's a really interesting country with a really different culture, as Mark said, and I'd like to experience that.
Yeah.
And it's something new. I've never done it before. And so I was up for it, but the other thing is, with it being from every country, I get to experience a little taster of every other country's culture, and that's what
a great idea. Isla, I mean, how long does it take to fly just to Japan? I mean, it really is the other side of the world, isn't it, from us?
We're flying from Manchester, and it's going to be 10 hours then to Abu Dhabi, and where we change over, and then another 10 hours over to Tokyo.
Wow, so 20 hours flying. You'll be exhausted by the time you get there, won't you? And what are you looking forward to about it particularly?
Definitely experiencing the cultures, as well as just being in home hospitality, where we live with a scouting family for 5 days. I think that'd be fantastic to experience the culture firsthand.
Gotcha.
And be able to talk to people about what
so
it's
not just all under canvas then in a field somewhere. You actually spend time with a Japanese family, a scouting family from Japan. I mean, it is an international sort of organisation, scouting, isn't it, Julian? So this must be one of the benefits, the fact of the international connections.
It is. The Scouting is the world's largest youth organisation. There's millions and millions of scouts out there, and it's fantastic to see them all gather, or a large proportion of them gathering together, as you said, in one big field. The field is absolutely massive.
Well, I mean, what Isla was saying about actually living with a scouting family in Japan as well. I mean, that's what makes the difference to it, to me, because if you're just going to be in a field somewhere, it could be anywhere, it doesn't really matter. If you are going to be able to soak up the local ambience and the atmosphere and the customs and practices and things, then that really does give it some value to me.
That's right. Scouts from the UK will be staying all over Japan. We're in a province called Gifu, and they're all going to be staying with different scouts families, from young beaver scouts up to leaders, and experiencing what those families get up to. Hopefully they'll be providing some entertainment for the Manx Scouts and the Merseyside Scouts we're going with as well.
Right.
And they'll get to see a bit of their culture and how they live over there.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week. Would the island benefit from an increase in its population? According to the Chamber of Commerce, the answer to that question is yes.
Could a significant growth in the island's population be an advantage to all of us? This week, Tynwald approved an update to the Agenda for Change strategy document from the Council of Ministers, which sets out plans for growing the economy and creating jobs by supporting new business. But the new business will need staff, and according to the island's Chamber of Commerce, it'll mean more off-island workers coming here. Chamber President Mickey Swindale has welcomed moves to encourage new business, as well as to relax laws governing work permits. She told Jason Roberts more working people means more money, which in turn means more public services.
Our pattern of net inward migration for the past 5 or 4 more years has been 500 people a year, a net 500 people a year, which sort of sounds fine on the face of it, but when you look at what that will do to the demographics of the Isle of Man over the next 10 years, which is what we looked at, frankly, it makes the hairs stand up on the back of your neck, because the two key statistics that really highlighted that for us were by 2026, that would mean a 44% increase in those over 65 and a 0.3% decrease in those between 25 and 44. So if we think we're facing a challenging fiscal picture now, and it's quite clear from some of the comment this week that we do, then it only takes a moment to imagine the very unpalatable prospect of life with a smaller working population and a significantly larger number of pensioners. If we were to double the trend, so say net inward migration of 1,000 a year, then by 2026, instead of that 0.3% decrease, we'd see an 11.4% increase in that core demographic group to support all of those silver surfers, and an increase in the total working population of the Isle of Man by about 15,000 to 20,000 people.
That was President of the Isle of Man Chamber of Commerce, Mickey Swindale. Is a potential increase in the working population of the island to be welcomed, or would encouraging a significant increase in the population have a detrimental impact on the quality of life for residents? Stu, do we need a population increase? Do we even want longer doctors' lists? Maybe it's time we had our own referendum, says Bill. Well, again, if we had extra people, then we'd have the money coming into the system to pay for more doctors, and therefore the net improvement might be pretty substantial, I would have thought. Let's go to the lines and see what Harry makes of this. Hello, Harry.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous, Stu, to be honest. I think if there's a future historian looking back at where the government went wrong, they have to go back to the first Chief Minister, probably.
Right.
He's been coming off the rails since then, you know, and this thing about trying to inject money into the economy by attracting more people, I mean, the place is in a mess now. If it had more people, it would have been a worse mess, you know. They don't need extra people here. If they just looked at the situation, how MHKs are on sort of £1,000 a week or whatever, and they tax people that are exempt from tax, like churches and things, that the money's there, you know. They don't need to attract more people. There's too many people here now. I've just been down into Douglas, and it took me 40 minutes to get into Douglas and out of Douglas, 20 minutes looking for a parking space. So if you inject another 15,000, 20,000 people and start coming into Douglas, it's going to be chaotic, you know.
Thanks for your call. Mickey Swindale thinks an extra 15,000 people will solve our problems and make ends meet and relax the work permit scheme. Is she for real? Oh, yes. The only thing this will achieve is more pressure on our resources, hospital, dentists, doctors, roads, etc. And all these people coming in will become pensioners, another burden perhaps. Well, if the young people that are coming in, they'll also have children. I think you would be foolish to underestimate Mickey Swindale. She's a very switched-on woman, and I don't think she's particularly got an axe to grind in this, so what she says, I think, is certainly worth a listen. Chamber of Commerce seems to be ignoring the fact that today's young are tomorrow's pensioners, so the funding of pensions will be an even greater problem in the future. If there's a sudden increase in the worker numbers, more money is to be put into the pot and unfair public sector payouts and pensions curbed. MHK's and MLC's pensions need to be halved, says Doug. Stu, if the government wants to attract new business and more people to the Isle of Man, they need to do something about the very high cost of living and get to grips with the high energy costs here on the Isle of Man. That from Paul. Yeah, but again, surely that's, I mean, I've mentioned a number of times on the programme when people complain about things. Fact is that with 85,000 of us, I suppose, you know, it's not really a huge number of people. The more people that there are, the more important we are as a buying group. And so, you know, things like energy, if it's spread over 100,000 rather than 85,000 people, maybe certain costs would come down. I know that in the real world, where the sky isn't this rose-tinted pink, that's unlikely to ever happen. I don't think prices will ever come down much in the Isle of Man, but economies of scale could start to work for us in some ways, I think. I believe they want to increase the population by a further 15,000 people. This means that we're going to need more new homes and schools and sewage and doctors and more countryside being ripped up, more cops, more demands in social care, etc., etc. Since we're reminded every day since 2012 that we're all living longer, we'll also need need more care homes and more carers. Where is all the money going to come from? Well, that's the whole thing, Michael. The money is going to come from the new people who are going to come in. They'll need 15,004 because we'll be off, says John. Okay. The highway infrastructure already very near capacity at peak times. An increase in population will require more government expenditure plus more GPs. What will be the extra cost of the extra expenditure? Stu, I would have thought that with the current tax rises from 10% to 20%, which is going to make middle-income people much worse off, the attraction of coming to the island is vastly dwindling. Not to be a cynic, but what has happened to all the people who've already left the island due to companies withdrawing, says Jan. Stu, have a look at the government's 2015 strategic plan. It's online. Census growth projections are 100,000 by 2026 anyway, with 4,200 houses needed, 2,000 of which will be in the east of the island. Interesting reading, says Julie. Thank you, Julie. Stu, you said that if they brought more people here, the infrastructure would need to expand and it'll be paid for by wealth created by the people who come over. But it won't improve things. In the 70s, they had a drive to encourage pensioners to come over. Despite concerns for the public, they didn't increase the infrastructure, and now they're paying for the policy. If all these new people come over, they'll need more schools, more doctors, more everything, so people won't be any better off than they are now. So how would people actually benefit from this? The Chamber of Commerce need to think more about what they say, not just money. Right, okay.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
The issue of politicians paying for parking was finally up for formal debate this week during the July sitting of the Tynwald Court.
Should politicians and government workers pay for parking when at work? A bid was made to get Tynwald members to support paying a charge in the Tynwald Chamber yesterday. Douglas South MHK Kate Beecroft put forward the motion that members of Tynwald should pay for their parking in the reserved car park in Tynwald from the start of the next session. That motion was seconded by Douglas East MHK Chris Robertshaw, who chose not to contribute to the debate. But Ramsey MHK Leonard Singer got to his feet to move an amendment to the motion.
My amendment reads that members of Tynwald accept the principle that members and public servants should pay for their parking, and that the Minister for Infrastructure should bring the detailed proposals to Tynwald in October 2015 for debate and approval. And I would like to make it quite clear, Madam President, beyond doubt, by repeating the first part of the amendment, that members of Tynwald accept the principle that members and public servants should pay for their parking. But as I say, I've moved that amendment, and I hope honourable members will support it, and the Minister will come back in October with a full plan, which we're then willing to support.
Member of the Legislative Council, Ewan Turner, questioned the thinking behind the idea of charging public sector workers. But it seems that there was little appetite for a long debate over the issue, and Lord Bishop urged that a vote be taken.
I commend the motion, the original motion. It does not preclude any other research or considerations that may be given. It is an expression of interest by this court and intent by this court about the members of this court. And that's all it is. That members of Tynwald should pay for their parking in the reserved car park in Tynwald from the start of the next session. This court is tired and ill-tempered, and there really can't be anything more to say.
The Lord Bishop of Soda and Man speaking in Tynwald yesterday. When it came to the vote, Mr Singer's amendment was supported by the majority of members, and the amended motion was given unanimous support. So is this a step towards introducing fairer rules for everyone, or will it just stall the charges being brought in? I'm a little bit on the fence about this, I have to say. I can see both sides of the argument. Let's see what you think about it. And first up is Mary. Hello, Mary.
I've always thought they should pay. Ewan Turner, he's so perverse. I just don't get it. What does it matter where the building is, if it's a government building? You know, schools, hospitals, whatever. What does it matter? Everybody should pay. The private sector, people on low pay have to pay for their parking. It costs them a fortune every month to pay. So what is the difference? I mean, he's saying, oh, well, I don't want it. I can park somewhere else, thanks. Well, that's fine. It's a valuable income stream to government then. Us, the owners of all this property, fantastic, we'll rent it out to the private sector who will use it.
On the face of it, that's kind of my point of view. And my point of view is that if they're going to introduce parking charges for people who used to get it for nothing in the past or whatever, then, they need to pay themselves as well. They need to be leading by example.
Correct.
But then when you look at the thing, Mary, and you think, all right, so why should they get the free parking spaces? Senior people in the private sector get effectively free parking spaces because their employers, the companies, pay for the parking as part of the contract. Yeah. So shouldn't that be the same in the public sector? The only difference is that
I mean, even if, he's going on about healthcare workers, nurses, etc., okay, let them pay a nominal sum. But I can remember working for the civil service, over 30 years ago, and when Chester Street car park was built, I paid then for a parking space that was taken out of my salary every month.
Right.
So I don't understand why civil servants aren't still paying for that now, that it used to be. What's the difference where the building is?
Well, I can see that. I mean, there is value in car parking spaces in the centre of Douglas, in the business district or whatever, and they're probably worth 30 quid a week or whatever. But, if you're talking about schools, for example, there are schools in Douglas that are still within that same district where the staff can park, in the playground or whatever, free of charge. So are we saying that they should have to pay as well?
Yes, even if it's a nominal sum. Okay. It's a valuable income stream. And if they don't want it and refuse to pay, we'll hire it out to the private sector.
All right. So Mary taking a hard line on that one.
Absolutely.
Good. We know where you stand on that, Mary. Thank you very much for your call. Stu, maybe MHKs need to pay to park, but we need a proper park and ride, a parkway outside of town covering north, south and west of the capital, not a park like the one by the bowls, says Bill. What a load of waffle. If it's introduced, members will probably be able to claim it back in expenses anyway. They already get mileage. So if it's introduced, it'll just produce more paperwork, says David. Rob's been on. I think this is just a publicity stunt. I think it's just a way for the Department of Infrastructure to get more revenue. The right course of action has been taken with this. People should look at the charges the department are charging external parkers, like the waste charges. Okay, the taxpayer paid for the staff car park, so there should be a charge levied. Let's have free parking or disc zones throughout the island, just like Guernsey. Problem solved, says Rob. Well, we do have free parking and disc zones throughout the island, don't we? Open up all the car parks to the public and charge to park there, then the public and government workers can make their own minds up whether they want to park there, says Alan. Well, that's fair. Singer's not daft, make an amendment delay until October, then the Christmas break. By the time it's approved, Parliament will be dissolved and half of them won't have to pay us. They won't be MHKs any longer, says Bill. Do you think, Bill? Parking, I think it's a difficult question. You have to put out of your head the word public servant. They're no different to the private sector in that as an employee they'll have conditions of contract which could include free parking. So this is a direct attack on their pay and conditions. That's a valid point. In the private sector, this sort of thing may or may not be accepted. We also seem to forget that when they increase charges, additional taxes, etc., the MHKs are affected just the same as the man in the street, says Malcolm.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
This week, Douglas Council was faced with a bit of a dilemma.
Should those we elect to serve us have to be on the electoral register themselves? Further talks are to take place in Douglas Council today over the removal of Councillor John Jockin. It was revealed this week that he had been removed from the council after it was discovered that he was no longer on the electoral roll. Legal advice sought by the council initially said Mr Jockin would have to go. There was then conflicting information from the Attorney General's chambers put out by the Department of Infrastructure yesterday afternoon, which said the legislation could be interpreted in more than one way. Council leader David Christian has described the situation as a complete and utter mess. Legislation, which means candidates standing for the House of Keys at the next general election will need to be registered as an elector for an electoral area, was approved by the branches of Tynwald this year. But should it be mandatory for those holding any political office to be on the electoral roll, or does it not matter? Let's go to the lines. We've got Michael on with a point of view on this. Hello, Michael.
I was more concerned of Mr Jockin saying he had sent the form in.
Yes.
I've had a number of instances of stuff not arriving or either Tommy or to a destination.
Right.
On the old system of filling these forms in, where I filled them in, sent it off, only months afterwards to receive another saying if it wasn't filled in, I wouldn't be on the voters list. And this was a yearly occurrence.
Oh, well, I said earlier on to Bob that I seem to go through a phase of getting these things every 3 months.
Another more serious, exactly almost 3 years ago, a tax bill was sent to me. Well, obviously I never received it. I just received it in January when I hadn't paid it.
Oh.
Saying it was overdue, I was liable to...
interest and all the rest of it, yeah.
So when I rang them up, and they said, well, it was posted on the 22nd of July.
Yes.
So obviously they sent me another. But to this day, I've not received that one that was posted on the 22nd of July.
How strange. And
that is 3 years ago.
Okay, so you can't imagine how it would go missing.
Was the census, the last census, where the form was delivered here. It hadn't been picked up for a week or so, and then a guy came round And I actually handed him the form, and only for about 6 to 8 weeks later get a threatening letter telling me I was liable to prosecution.
Because you'd not sent the form in.
Because I'd not filled this form in. It was a requirement by law. So, again, next day I phoned up a number on the letter, just said what I've told you now.
Yeah, you actually gave it to the fella.
Yeah, and they said, well, just hang on, we'll ring you back tomorrow. Within 2 hours, I had a phone call telling me they'd had another look and found it. Now, then, I have every sympathy with John Jochen.
Sure, yeah.
Because that form could be in there, hiding somewhere in a pigeonhole.
Yeah, a big pile of unopened mail, yeah. All right, Michael, nice to hear from you today. Thank you very much for calling us. I hope you call again. Let's have a look at some texts and emails. You're going on about councillors being on the voters list to be able to stand, yet I believe MHKs only need to be an island resident for 5 years to be able to stand and don't have to be on the voters list. Should be the same for all politicians across the board, says James. My understanding is that certainly as of the next general election next year, you do have to be on the voters list. I think that's something that's been through the branches of Tynwald. 5 years residency, whether or not that's enough, I don't know. Would you want your town governed by a person that can't keep their own paperwork in order, says Dewan? Well, as Michael just said, you know, and I think as John Jochen himself said, you know, I think he thought he was up to date on it. And there is always the chance, I mean, you know, we always presume that if you stick something in the post box, it's going to get to its destination. There is a chance that it's gone missing somewhere. It has been known to happen. The whole issue of having to fill in a form so that you can vote is a nonsense. Why is it necessary? Even if your tax and national insurance are up to date, you should be automatically entitled to vote. There is, yeah, I can see the sense in that. I know that people take this incredibly seriously, this whole thing about, you know, your entitlement to vote and making sure that there's no jiggery-pokery going on. So I suppose that's why these things have to go out every now and then saying, you know, are you the head of the household? Tell us who's there and all the rest of it. I guess it's to try and make sure that there's no electoral fraud. I have been a past local commissioner, and the first thing that then Clark did was check voters list to make sure that myself and other supporters were on the said list. So I asked the question, who is not doing their job? Right then, okay, I don't know. Final comment of the day goes to Jackie. Says, the recent hoo-ha over John Jochen throws up a number of issues for me. Personally, I totally believe that anyone who wants to belong to a society uses the services it provides. You need to be on the voters list. You need to be in it to win it. That applies to jury service too. In the case of Mr Jochen, I assume that he was on the list when elected but has fallen off it during his term. If the intention is there to be on the list, then common sense should prevail to ensure that he's entered back on it. If he did in fact send the forms back, as many in the Douglas by-election stated, then there's definitely something not working with the current list management. Maybe if you submit a tax form or claim benefit, this should automatically put you on the voters list with the option to opt out. At the end of the day, a good democratic political system wants to empower all members of society, or at least as many as possible. And if it's true that many have fallen off the list through error, their own or others, then it's clear that it should be opt out rather than opt in. Then if you don't want to vote, you don't have to, but you can if you want. As an aside, the government did tell people to check that they were included in the register. I checked I was, but how many of those claiming that they should have been didn't before the deadline, says Jackie. Good.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads over the past week. As ever, our thanks to everyone who took part in the programme. And you can get involved in Talking Heads each weekday by tuning in between midday and 2 p.m. and getting your thoughts to us by calling, texting or emailing. If you can't get in touch while the programme's on air, you can get involved in the debate by visiting the Facebook page, that's Talking Heads with Stu Peters, and posting your comments under the relevant topic. But please remember to keep what you post within reason. There's a chance to catch up on each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com, and you'll also find a daily update of the topics up for discussion on the programme on the website too. That information's also available on the Facebook page or by following Stu Manx on Twitter. If you'd like to suggest something for discussion on the programme, get it to us by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.